It's a beautiful song. I love it. I never know which part to sing, but I love it. So that is wonderful. And glad you're here today, as we've already said, and today we are talking about light. Now, if you have been going to church for a long time, all your life, or for years, you may have heard many, many sermons about light. And if this is your first time, this may be your first. We have folks that come here almost every week. I meet someone who says, I haven't been to church in years, or maybe this is my first time. So we have people at all different stages in their religious life. But today we're talking specifically about light, something that is important in almost every culture. Obviously, it is important in history, it's important in science, it's important in everything. But we look at Jesus as the light. I think about John chapter 8, verse 12, where it says that Jesus spoke to them again, to his disciples, as well as to soon-to-be disciples. And he said, I am the light of the world, and anyone who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is always perfect for you. It doesn't even mean that you do everything perfectly, but you are walking in Jesus, and you are walking in his light toward what is good, and you are doing what is good and hopefully what is right, but toward what is right. I read a story this past week about two boys. It really could have been about me, myself, or about one of you probably. But the story was about, in particular, about two boys who went to their grandparents' cabin out in the middle of the woods, in the forest. And the boys were playing out in the forest, and the cabin was far away, and they start playing, and they walk a little deeper into the woods, and a little deeper, and a little deeper, and they're having a great time, and all at once it is dark, and they can't see anything. There is no starlight, there is no moonlight, there is nothing. They are so deep in the woods, and they are scared to death. And so they hear the sound of little animals probably rustling in the leaves on the bottom floor, and they are scared to death. What in the world does that mean? Even whenever they would yell, is anyone there? They would hear their echo and think it was a scary person talking back to them. They had seen way too many scary movies, and now they imagined everything that could be wrong, and they were crying as they started just walking, and they would run into branches, but they kept walking until finally, far, far away, they could see what looked like a little tiny light. And what that light was the porch light at the grandparents' home. And they kept walking until finally they got to the place that they needed to be. It wasn't necessarily easy, but they got there. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. What a beautiful concept that we need, that Jesus says. I remember a time back after Hurricane Ike, back in about, 2008 probably, when we were without electricity here at the church building for several days, 8 or 10 days, and the building had a little bit of damage, not terrible damage, but a little bit, and there was no electricity, and I came up here the day afterwards, and the alarm was going off, and it was a creepy place to be. You can imagine what that's like. And I remember walking in those back doors. It was before we had this whole new addition, and I remember as I looked into the auditorium, I just turned on the flashlight of my phone, obviously a different phone in those days. I turned on the flashlight of the phone, and it was amazing what I could see, even with just a little light. I could see the building was still fine. I could see these big lights. I could see all of this, that it was here. But imagine if someone were on the other side in the complete dark, they would be able to walk toward that light. There is something so important and so valuable about light. And what Jesus does is Jesus offers amazing hope. Because the hope that Jesus offers is not it might happen, but hope in Jesus means it is going to happen, and even it is happening. He offers this amazing hope to those who will go to the light. And I want you to know this morning that if you came in and don't know what's going on in your life, maybe you're a member or you've never been here, if you are confused or lost or disappointed, Jesus is what you need. Jesus can help you in your interpersonal relationships. Jesus can help you in your marriage. Jesus can help you if you're not married and maybe never have been, or you're divorced, or whatever situation you're in. He can help you with your parents. He can help you with your business. He can help you in all of your relationships and in your personal life. Jesus can be that person to help, because that's who Jesus is. When we live by His light and by His morals and His ethics, Jesus helps all of those things. Matter of fact, Jesus came to this world to bring saving light. It was prophesied about Him hundreds of years before. I think about one specific prophecy to talk about the light in Jesus in Isaiah chapter 60, where the Bible says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord shines over you. For look, darkness will cover the earth, and total darkness the peoples, but the Lord will shine over you, and His glory will appear over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to your shining brightness." Isn't that a beautiful phrase to think about? Nations will come to your light, and kings to your shining brightness. This is what Jesus does. I also think of a well-known passage of when Jesus was talking to His disciples before He went back to heaven in John chapter 9, verse 5, where He says this to his disciples. He says, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And so literally, physically, for 33 years, He's in the world. And yes, He is the light. Whenever He was here in those days and living in ancient Israel, He was there as the light. But even today, in a sense, Jesus is still here and still with us, and He is certainly still the light. And those of us who are Christians, those of us who are following Jesus, we are filled with His light. He said that, matter of fact, in what's known as the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and verses 14 through 16. He says, "You are the light of the world." He says this to His followers. "You are the light of the world. You are a city that is situated on a hill that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." Now, doesn't this just make sense? He said, you're the light, and you're to be a light to other people. That's what you're supposed to do. This morning when you were getting dressed, there's a good chance you went into your closet and you may have opened the door to the closet and you turned on the light so you could see when you were there. You didn't go in the dark, try to find clothes, then come out, close the door, and turn on the light inside the closet where no one was, right? You turn on the light so you can see. The purpose of us as Christians in this world is to be that light. Today we're going to be thinking of some of that. So what does it mean to be light? What is he saying? Well, first of all, we're to be obvious. If you are a city set on a hill, the purpose of being there is so people see you. They are to see us as light. They're not to see us as a problem, but to see us as good, to go toward the light. So it's live obviously. There may be a time that you have to be quiet, but most of the time it is live obviously in front of other people. You are a city set on a hill. I think of those stories back from World War II and even before of cities whenever airplanes would come in to bomb the cities, for example. You've read some of those stories. They would turn off all the electricity in a city so that those who were bombing by sight wouldn't be able to see where the city was. Well, Jesus says, we are a city on a hill that is full of light. And people are drawn to light because it's what they need. When we talk about morals, ethics, and salvation and all those things, we are to shine so that they say, I want more of that. But he also says that we give God the credit because we are the light of the world, but only because Jesus is the light of the world. He says, let your deeds be seen by other people so that they may glorify your Father in heaven. So when I do a good deed, I should be saying, it's not about me, but it is about the one I serve. It is about Jesus. It is about honoring the Father. It is about giving praise there. You say, okay, well, how do I do all that? Well, understand this. Our purpose is to be God's light, to walk in His light, and to guide others in His light. This is your purpose. If you're sitting around going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I don't know. Well, this doesn't help you find a job. This doesn't help you decide if you want to be married or whatever. But this is your purpose. If you are looking for employment or changing careers or whatever it may be, you should wonder, you should ask, if this is something that helps me be God's light, or is this something that takes me away from God? Does this help me walk in God's light, and does this help me guide other people to God? And if the answer is no on any of those three, then maybe that is not the occupation for you. Maybe that is not the place to live for you. Maybe that is not the hobby for you, if you are not able to do these things. Because this is our purpose, to be God's light, to walk in His light, and to guide others to His light, for all of us. Several years ago now, it's probably been 15 or 16 years ago, my mother had been really ill. She had been in a coma. She was obviously aged. My dad had died years ago. She was living by herself, and she went into a coma, and she went to rehab to get her body better as she woke up. And we realized she was not going to ever be who she was before physically. Mentally, she was great. But physically, it wasn't going to happen. And so somehow it became my job, along with Barbara's, to tell her she was not going to leave the facility. She was going to stay there. I still remember the day. I'll never forget the day. These are conversations you do not want to have with your parent or your sibling or with your mate. And so we talked about it. I still remember where we sat out in kind of the general area of the home. I said, you have to stay. You can't take care of yourself. We're too far away. You have steps to your house. All those things that were so difficult. And I will never forget. She said, well, I guess that means there's someone here in this home that needs me to tell them about Jesus. I want to be that way. It was amazing that her mind was so good, but in what we might call the public home she was in was not the greatest place in the world. But there were nurses that went to church on Sunday mornings, not her nurses with her, but I mean sat across the way from her, because she was taught, her friends were the nurses. And she would talk to them about Jesus all the time. You need to know Jesus. You need to go to church. You need to do those things. What an example I have, right? You see, we have this purpose to be telling other people about Jesus wherever, whatever, whenever. That somehow we are a light to the world, living like Jesus. In John chapter 14 and verse 6, Jesus told them, He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He says, you see, this is really important. It's a big deal. Jesus is saying, I am the way, the truth, the life. And He's going to say, I'm the light. I am the way. Come this way. In John 8:12, He goes on, Jesus spoke to them again. And He said, I am the light of the world, not a light, but the light. And anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but they will have the light of life. He's saying, you've got to come this way. You cannot continue in darkness. Darkness is getting you nowhere. You keep running into the wall, blooding your nose. Stop running into the wall. Walk toward the light. And Jesus says, I am that light. I'm the one. Tell all the people. Now you're the light that is to lead them to the true light. Walk that way. So you say, okay, well, that's great. This is all theoretical. Another sermon, theoretical. Well, how can I be the light of Christ? How can I do that? Well, first of all, we've got to practice the two great commands. And you say, well, what were they? First one, Jesus said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind, with your whole being. Love God. And so then he followed it up because he knew they'd say, well, what's the second greatest? And he said, to love your neighbor as yourself. Wow, you know what? I love loving my neighbors that I love. Does that make sense? But I do not love loving the neighbors I don't naturally love. It is really easy to be nice to those people who think like I do. And those people who we have a lot in common and we can talk forever. It is a lot harder to talk to the others sometimes. Especially if you know that they're kind of grouchy and they're not going to say nice things or do nice things, and they might turn you into the HOA. Those sometimes are difficult, right? But love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus was just standing there, and the guy asked him this question, well, who is my neighbor? Because that was the big question, right? And you remember he then gave them the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in the Good Samaritan, we find out that the neighbor is even the person who thinks completely differently than we do about everything. A person that we would think we would have nothing in common with, that we would even call an enemy. And he says, love that person. It is so easy to love those who we love. But it makes an even greater difference when we love people that we may not naturally have much in common with, and we love them. So practice the two great commands and show the fruit of the Spirit in your life. So you remember we had that kind of long series where we talked about the fruit of the Spirit, and you may remember what they are: of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. To show that love like we just talked about, to have a joy. Joy is not dependent on me being happy. Joy is something that I still know that there's this hope that even if my house burns down and I lose my friends and my family and everything else, I still know that I'm going to be with Jesus forever. I can still have a joy even if all of that goes away. I can still have a joy that is beyond what some might even be able to imagine. It's a peace that what the Bible says, it's a peace that can't be explained. A peace that surpasses understanding. Once again, it's because of a hope that I have, because of a light that I know, and a light that I see that is in Jesus. It is patience. You know, sometimes when I think about patience and I think about this passage, I just think about standing at the grocery store and waiting. That's about as far as patience go. But you know, in these big situations, maybe you are waiting on a relationship, or maybe it is a job situation or a health situation. It is about being patient and letting God work in those things. Living on God's time rather than on our time. That is really hard to do. But when we display that to the world and they say, wow, where does that come from? And you say it comes from Jesus. It is something that can't be explained. It's from Him. Kindness and goodness, not just being kind or good to those we like, but kind and good to those who are difficult people. Incidentally, if you think they're difficult, there's a good chance they think you're difficult, right? Faithfulness, not giving in no matter what. We are faithful to God. Not about things, but to God we're faithful. To be gentle, even on those difficult days. And then using self-control. Oh, it's so difficult to control our mouths with what we say and what we ingest. Those things are so tough sometimes to do. I know how difficult they are. He says, use these things. If we practice the fruit of the Spirit, then we become a light. And people start saying, why are you that way? Now, this doesn't mean to go preach a sermon to everyone. Probably if you go stand out on the corner and start yelling, repent and be baptized, the police will come and take you away, right? It doesn't usually work that way. Those that don't take you away, they'll just think you're strange, more than likely. But I think about a story. Some of you may know this trivia. This is just trivia. First city in the United States to have electric lights for the city was Philadelphia. And now you know, what did you learn in church today? This is what you learned, right? But Benjamin Franklin was pushing for lights to be throughout Philadelphia, to have public lighting on the streets. And so it didn't go very far. So you know what he did? He went and put out what they called in those days a gas candle, which we would call like a kerosene lamp. And he put a little hook out in front of his door of his house, and he hung it there. And people said, wow, that's kind of neat. It looks pretty. There's light. You know, the pavement's all lit up there at Franklin's house. If somebody went to visit him, he could see them and they could see him. That's kind of a neat idea. And then a neighbor did it, and another neighbor, and another. And then they're saying, we ought to have this all over the city. Sometimes that's what it's like to be a Christian, maybe in your office place, or maybe even in your family where no one is Christian but you, is to start living like Jesus and being the light quietly rather than preaching, which will get you kicked out, but to sometimes be the light quietly is what will bring people to Jesus. So we show the fruit of the Spirit, and we love people, and we lead people, and we live our faith because it's all about Jesus. It is all about Him. Remembering in every situation, when you think, I just want to tell that guy off, how will this reflect on Jesus? If they know I'm a Christian, how will that reflect on Jesus? Will this bring that person closer to Christ, or will it push them farther away? What will that do for their soul if I act that way? It's hard to do. Believe me, I'm not saying this as one who perfects all this. I'm just saying how we can show Christ more in our life. And I am not saying to be a pushover. I don't mean that at all. You can stand your ground, but you can stand your ground with gentleness and love and self-control and all those other things. I can show light by the way I handle victory and adversity and everyday life. I want to share with you for just a second. I don't want to bore you with hearing how I write sermons, so I'm going to bore you for just a moment on how I write sermons. That sounds funny, doesn't it? Y'all are very quiet today, so I've noticed. But when I write sermons and I preach on Sunday morning and Sunday night, and then I go home on Sunday night, and I start writing Sunday morning sermon for next week on Sunday night. So tonight, the last thing I'll do before I go to sleep is I'll be working on a sermon. I'll be reading and maybe writing some notes. I'll be reading the Bible. I'll be reading some other books and things. And it's just the way I do it. Every preacher is a little bit different. And I will also, at that point, on Sunday night, at some point, have a little tiny panic attack where I think, this is not going to work. I have preached the last sermon I'm ever able to preach. Happens almost every week. I think that for a second. And then I'll get up early on Monday morning, and I'll start writing, and then there are meetings and other things that happen during the day. And then usually somewhere between 10 and midnight, I will turn in PowerPoint. Now, some of the things in the midst of the sermon, well, the way I word it will certainly change, but the PowerPoint itself, that was turned in last Monday. The reason I'm telling you this is because when I wrote this, I didn't know how the election would turn out. You might have thought you knew. I had no idea. Just like you really didn't have any idea. I didn't know what side would win. But this is what I knew and what I know. Whether you are in a place that you are elated or you are sad or you didn't even know we had an election. Wherever you are. Oh, was that last week? I meant to go vote. I forgot. Wherever you are. You can show the light of Jesus in victory or in adversity or in everyday life. We still show Jesus in the way we win or in the way we lose or in the way we disagree or the way we agree. Whatever it is, we still must be the light always. So here's my question for you this morning. Are you in a dark place? Some of us this morning, my guess is you are in a dark place, and the reason you came this morning or you're tuning in this morning is because you are down about something. It may be something in your social life, your occupation, whatever. You're in a dark place. Relationships aren't going well, whatever it is. You might have even said to yourself before, I have prayed and I don't know where God is. Where is God? I read a thing this past week I thought was really interesting. And they were talking about caves. And some of you, I don't know if you've ever been down in a cave obviously under the ground. We've been in one in Missouri and New Mexico, and there are lots of caves in Kentucky, lots of places you can go to caves. Sometimes when you're in those caves, they will turn out the lights. And it will be so dark you can't see a thing. You can't see your hand right here. I mean, you can't see a thing at all. It's dark. But this is what I learned this past week. That there is not a place anywhere where there is absolute darkness. There are always photons, that little bit of light. We can't see it, but the light is there. When I read that, I could not help but think about God. I may feel like God is not there. I may feel like that I've prayed and nothing has happened. I may feel like that my relationships are no better, my job is no better, the things I'm dealing with are no better, the politics are no better. I may feel that way, but the light is always there. Jesus, the light, is always there. This morning, if you are ready to come to the light, you have not been baptized into Jesus. You haven't repented and said, I hate it that I lived against you, but now I'm ready to live for you. And to be baptized into Jesus, where your sins will be washed away and you'll receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. You'll be in Jesus. You can do that. You can come forward. You can talk to me about it afterwards. But you can be baptized today. You're thinking, that's not the problem. The problem is I'm in a dark place and I need prayers. I need to know the light is there. This whole group will pray for you, and this group will help affirm that the light is there. Or you can write to us at prayer@mcoc.org. Do not be left in the dark. Come to Jesus. Come as we stand and sing.